What's going on? All right, looks like we got one live, and I do not understand. Doesn't look like it's sending a signal to this vertical, but last time this happened, there was a stream, but it's not where it's supposed to be for me, so I apologize, guys, if you're in the vertical. Oh, yep, there it is. What the hell? Auto change. Sorry, guys, let me just fix this real quick. Can I do this when it's live already? Oh, no. Yeah, it's got the wrong tags, and I don't understand what's going on. It's like there's a glitch in my Streamlabs or something. Just a second. So weird. Okay, so yeah, I guess we're good. Okay, there we go. So we're getting into the Philosopher's Stone tonight. This is one of the great mysteries of the Western occult tradition. Let me put my headphones on because I've been having audio issues, and I would like to know if it starts breaking up so I can fix it for you guys right away. Yeah, so what is the Philosopher's Stone? The truth is, no one knows except for successful alchemists. It is probably more than one thing, in my opinion. Gold, actual physical gold, is in a sense the Philosopher's Stone. And there's a reason why it is the symbol of alchemical gold, or why the alchemical, the end goal of the alchemical process is something related to gold, right? Gold is, most of it in the universe is created when neutron stars collide. They are 115 yards across on average, but a spoonful weighs as much as Mount Kilimanjaro. And it's very rare, but when they collide, heavy metals are dispersed throughout the universe, and most of the gold in our brains originates in stars. And there is increasing evidence that gold plays a very important role in our cognitive processes. A relatively recent revelation that light can activate superconductors that aren't at their critical temperature and make them superconductive because they aren't otherwise, could explain our brain's processing power to an extent. The observation that photons are emitted by both neurons and entangled by photon pairs and also microtubules. There is light doing stuff in our brains, and there's gold in there, so that relationship is tentative but certain in my mind. Also, if you take colloidal gold supplements, it's so efficacious at restoring brain function, for example, that people that have psychosis from syphilis have been brought back into, baseline sanity using colloidal gold. And also studies indicate that every aspect of everything that our brain covers is improved by colloidal gold, and it just happens to store in the brain. So there's that connection, and I think it's a pretty important one. Some people you'll see say that a real alchemist is not trying to make gold. they are trying to make an allegorical gold that has to do with the transmutation of the lead of everyday experience into the gold of higher consciousness. And this is absolutely true. But I don't think that it's not about making gold either. One of the tenets of Hermeticism or Illuminism is knowledge of this world being used in concert with spiritual knowledge, right? And the goal of the mysteries, basically, is to eventually initiate, and I think this is the moment for it personally. How did Albert Pike say it? The great revolution prepared by the ages that has for its aim the amelioration of mankind from servitude, despotism, bigotry, religion, superstition, etc. And some of the rules in this world are dictated to us and not by us, and one of those is that money is power. So if the alchemist has for his goal the transmutation, the great work of revolutionizing the consciousness of the planet, then he has to do both. And that's what I believe alchemy is really about. In fact, if you watch my stream that I did on the Templars, I think last time it was Friday the 13th, they get into some detail about that. And one of the most compelling aspects of that is that the Templars were basically broke-ass monks. And somehow they got the, like, 3/4 of the crowned heads of Europe desperately in debt to them. And people will say, if you ask how did they do that, people will say they started a bank. Okay, cool. Go start a bank. And not only that, but start a bank that is initially, like at launch, able to, to give out loans that royalty would want. You know what I mean? And a bunch of them. It really doesn't add up, and there's no way to make it add up. The Templars were alchemists. And I had a bunch of ideas and theories about that, and I had not read this chapter of this book yet. And I gave my, assumptions, educated guesses about what I thought was really going on. And then I read the chapter, and this 33rd degree Freemason seemed to confirm all of these things. So if you haven't seen that, I would strongly recommend going to check it out. It looks like I got on the wrong page. I'm going to check in with the chat real quick too before we jump in. The chapter on the Philosopher's Stone is actually pretty short. So we're going to do that one, and we're going to do divination, and we may also do the key to the secret sciences. And then this part of the book ends, and we get into the actual ritual. And I'm looking forward to that. So let me check in with the chat, make sure everything's kosher, and then we will dive right in. Okay, cool. All righty. This is going to be good. For sure. Surprised that we have such a small audience tonight. This is kind of the culmination of this and a popular subject. So do me a favor, you guys, and share these streams. They're not getting the love they deserve, I don't think. Okay, so the Stone of the Philosophers, Elagabalus. The ancients adored the sun under the figure of a black stone, which they named Elagabalus or Heliogabalus, which was also a Roman emperor. What did this stone signify, and how came it to be the image of the most brilliant of luminaries? The disciples of Hermes, before promising their adepts the elixir of long life or the powder of projection, counseled them to seek for the philosophical stone. What is this stone, and why a stone? The great initiator of the Christians invites his believers to build on the stone or rock, if they do not wish their structures to be demolished. He terms himself the cornerstone and says to the most faithful of his apostles, "Thou art Peter, Petrus, and upon this rock, Petrum, I will build my church." This stone, say the masters in alchemy, is the true salt of the philosophers, which is the third ingredient in the composition of azote. That confuses me because azote is mercury, as far as I understand, and he has made several references that imply that it's not. So it must have had a like a second form in this process. Now we know already that azote is the name of the great hermetic and true philosophical agent. Furthermore, their salt is represented under the figure of a cubic stone, as may be seen in the 12 keys of Basil Valentine, or in the allegories of Trevisan. Once more, what is this stone actually? It is the foundation of absolute philosophy. It is supreme and immovable reason. Before even dreaming of the metallic work, we must be fixed forever upon the absolute principles of wisdom. We must possess that reason which is the touchstone of truth. Never will a man of prejudices become the king of nature and the master of transmutations. And this is incredibly important, and he really got deep into this in the beginning of the book, about how reason is basically God. And this is a tremendously difficult thing for people to cross this bridge, because it requires a level of objectivity that it goes against instinct even. And it requires a certain fearlessness in the face of the unknown. And so the process of attaining to this level of reason, or to having the capacity to reason in this way, most people, even that seek after knowledge, don't really want that. They start with a set of preconceptions and also prerequisites that they want their knowledge to conform to and not violate. And that is not the way of the universe. And so, you must achieve that sort of intellectual homeostasis. Otherwise, you cannot even truly begin the work. My mic, before even dreaming of the metallic work, we must be fixed forever upon the absolute principles of wisdom. We must possess that reason which is the touchstone of truth. Never will a man of prejudices become the king of nature and a master of transmutation. The philosophical stone is hence before all things necessary. How is it to be found? Hermes informs us in the Emerald Table. We must separate the subtle from the fixed with great care and assiduous attention. Thus we must separate our certitudes from our beliefs and sharply distinguish the respective domains of science and faith, understanding thoroughly that we do not know things which we believe, and that we cease immediately to believe anything which we come actually to know. So that the essence of the things of faith is the unknown and the indefinite, while it is quite the reverse with the things of science. This man was very concise in his articulations. It must thence be inferred that science rests on reason and experiment, while the basis of faith is sentiment and reason. In other words, the philosophical stone is the true certitude which human prudence assures to conscientious researches and modest doubt, whilst religious enthusiasm ascribes it exclusively to faith. Now it belongs neither to reason without aspirations nor to aspirations without reason. True certitude is the reciprocal acquiescence of the reason which knows in the sentiment which believes, and of the sentiment which believes in the reason which knows. We'll chop this up in a minute. The permanent alliance of reason and faith will result not from their absolute distinction and separation, but from their mutual control and their fraternal concurrence. Nice. Such is the significance of the two pillars of Solomon's porch. one named Akin and the other one Boaz, one black and the other white. They are distinct and separate. They are even contrary in appearance. But if blind force sought to join them by bringing them close to one another, the roof of the temple would collapse. Separately, their power is one. Joined, they are two powers which destroy one another. For precisely the same reason, the spiritual power is weakened whensoever it attempts to usurp the temporal, while the temporal power becomes the victim of its encroachments on the spiritual. So, man, I probably should have unpacked that little by little, but one of the things that comes to mind is, man, I got to go back so I can have some reference here. Separating the subtle from the fixed with great care and assiduous attention, separating our certitudes from our beliefs, and to sharply distinguish the respective domains of science and faith, understanding thoroughly that we do not know things which we believe, and that we cease immediately to believe anything which we can actually know. So, in science right now, we have the situation that I've noticed. And a scientist is supposed to bend their not beliefs, their opinion, according to their observations. And we have evidence of non-neural intelligence. We have evidence of adaptations in the morphology of organisms that appear to be context aware. In other words, the organism seems to know that it needs to happen right away. And the change is of such a nature that the organism itself couldn't be aware of it. And it's response driven, right? And on. We have an anesthesiologist who has proven that consciousness is turned off by anesthetics at the level of the electron and such things like this. And the evidence is emerging from across different disciplines, right? So if it was just like one bit of evidence here or there, it wouldn't be as meaningful. But we have this in aggregate, right? So the response should be that science in general sees this and makes an adaptation, right? It's suicidal, unalive. God damn it, algorithm. You guys know what I mean. It's a bad idea, not to adapt, because evolution favors the most adaptable, not the strongest necessarily, right? So if you refuse to adapt, you're doomed. And what they're doing in these respective fields, for the most part, is scrambling to find any possible explanation for the things they're observing other than teleology in nature, other than acknowledging that there is some sort of universal mind. In fact, what is that? Simulation theory. Basically what's going there is that we have geeks that, have things have happened, like a physicist saw error codes in supersymmetry equations. And what they're seeing is evidence that there's a creator. But they are so indoctrinated, so attached to their beliefs, that they'll come up with anything but, when these people see this and you watch the videos that they've made in favor of simulation theory, they will not even say, or it could be evidence of an organic entity having coded the universe. Anything to avoid that. This is not science. This is dogma. This is not building your temple or your home upon a rock. And another aspect of that is, he was kind of alluding to the rock actually being the stone of the wise. So let's say it's illumination that you must build your society upon. Otherwise, it will be destroyed. The empire is falling right now. And the reason, 100% of the reason, is that the society, the culture, was not built upon the stone of the wise. In fact, it was engineered to deliberately suppress awareness of the stone, which is a terminal mistake, as we shall soon see. Another interesting little bit here, and it's a great example of how, he said your faith and certitude should actually work together, basically. And they should be sort of derived from each other, even, in a sense, at least informed. And he mentioned the two towers, Jachin and Boaz. Basically, one of them symbolizes negative and one positive. And he mentioned how they destroy each other, basically, two opposing forces that destroy each other. Well, now one of our great minds of physics is telling us that eventually every particle will meet its exactly equal and opposite anti-corollary, and they will destroy each other, and what will remain is photons. That is exactly the process described in the Kabbalah. And so when we see that congruence, it is exactly as he described, at least for me, because I had the intuitive feeling that what was described in the Kabbalah was correct. And there were also observations you can make in the real world that support that. But this dovetailing with physics is, exactly this process. And there's a lot of that available to us in this moment. So let's figure out where we were at. The sun and the moon of the alchemist correspond to the, is this right? Did I go too far? I want to make sure. This is, oh, maybe I did go too far. No, that was correct. That's where we are. The sun and the moon of the alchemist correspond to the same symbol and concur in the perfection and stability of the philosophical stone. The sun is the hieroglyphic sign of truth, because it is the visible source of light, and the rude stone is the symbol of stability. It was for this reason that the ancients took the stone Elagabalus as the actual type of the sun, and for this also that the medieval alchemists pointed to the philosophical stone as the first means of making philosophical gold. That is to say, of transforming the vital forces represented by the six metals into soul, that is, into truth and light. The first and indispensable operation of the great work, leading to the secondary adaptations and discovering by the analogies of nature the natural and grosser gold to the possessors of the spiritual and living gold, of the true salt, the true mercury, and the true sulfur of the philosophers. To find the philosophical stone is then to have discovered the absolute, as the masters otherwise say. Now the absolute is that which admits of no errors. It is the fixation of the volatile. It is the rule of the imagination. It is the very necessity of being. It is the immutable law of reason and truth. The absolute is that which is. Now that which is in some sense precedes who is. God himself cannot be in the absence of a reason of being, and can exist only in virtue of a supreme and inevitable reason. It is this reason which is the absolute. It is this in which we must believe if we desire a rational and solid foundation for our faith. It may be said in these days that God is merely a hypothesis, but the absolute reason is not a hypothesis. It is essential to being. This is a very difficult thing to really articulate, but a good summary, I guess, is to make the example of like the popular pop culture sort of new age, there's almost like a trendy spiritual disposition that has the approval of the gatekeepers of pop culture psychology or whatever. And I encountered this yesterday, where people with that disposition seem to kind of think that spirituality is just like something that you make up. And a lot of them will just kind of think things and then they believe them because they think that's how it works or something. And I haven't heard this in a long time, but People used to say in those kind of circles all the time that your truth is true for you, which is an absolute lie. It's not. Things are either true objectively or they are not. There is some variability, the laws and the expression, your particular singular way of interfacing with the universe is not the same for everyone. And the limitations of manifestation and all sorts of other phenomena seem to also vary from individual to individual. The universe does not play by the exact same rules for each person, although it does. They're the same rules and the same objective truths, and the variability is actually produced by those laws. You know what I mean? It's not that there are any fundamental truths that vary from person to person. There's your perception, but that's got nothing to do with absolute truth and reason. And the reality is, there's all these religions and all these different belief systems and all this stuff, and they're, either right or wrong. It's not a personal matter. It's not mutable. The universe exists for some reason. It came about in some certain way. When you die, a certain thing is going to happen, and there's no variance. It may be that if you believe something absolutely, that can inform your experience after you die, but the fundamental, reality of it is going to be the same for everyone. So that is a hurdle that a lot of people have a hard time getting over. And it also makes it difficult to speak about, because if there are initiated adepts all over the place that know this truth, if they try to tell people, look, there is a truth and there are a bunch of people that know it, you run the risk of coming off like a Charles Manson type or, a know-it-all, and it's not very well received generally. That's one of the reasons it's not done that way. These processes that lead to these revelations can be catalyzed in the individual. And that process is really the only way to gnosis and knowledge. However, we're totally fucked if we don't figure out how to disseminate this on a large scale and right away. So I would say we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, but we're on that bridge. Working on it, guys. St. Thomas once said, a thing is not just because God wills it, but what God wills it because it is just. And even better paraphrasing of that I've seen was Albert Pike in his book Morals and Dogma. He said they're not just because they're his laws because they are just. And that doesn't mean fair. It means that the laws of the universe and the resultant expression of those laws is as they are because they could not be predicated along any other lines and do this. Things are as they are because of the law of necessity. And when you really understand this, it really helps to understand, for example, the presence of evil in the world. Had St. Thomas logically deduced all the consequences of his beautiful thought, he would have found the philosophical stone. And besides being the angel of the school, he would have been its reformer. To believe in the reason of God and in the God of reason is to render atheism impossible. When Voltaire said if God did not exist, it would be necessary to invent him, he felt rather than understood the reason which is in God. Does God really exist? There is no knowing, but we desire it to be so, and hence we believe it. Faith thus formulated is reasonable faith, for it admits the doubt of science, and as a fact, we believe only in things which seem to us probable, though we do not know them. To think otherwise is delirium. To speak otherwise is to talk like the illuminated or fanatical. I don't know why he said illuminated. That's probably a mistranslated word. Now, it is not to such persons that the philosophical stone is promised, The ignoramuses, who have turned primitive Christianity from its path by substituting faith for science, dream for experience, and fantastic for the real. Inquisitors who, during so many ages, have waged a war of extermination against magic, have succeeded in enveloping with darkness the ancient discoveries of the human mind, and so that we are now groping for the key to the phenomena of nature. Now, all natural phenomena depend upon a single and immutable law represented by the philosophical stone, and especially by its cubic form. This law, expressed by the tetrad in the Kabbalah, furnished the Hebrews with all the mysteries of their divine tetragram, which we would call the tetragrammaton. It may be said, therefore, that the philosophical stone is square in every sense, like the heavenly Jerusalem of St. John, that one of its sides is inscribed with the name, I don't know, and the other with that of God, and a second that of Heva, and two others that of Azot and Inri. In the beginning of the French translation of a book by the Sieur de Nusme on the philosophical assault, the spirit of the earth is represented standing on a cube over which tongues of flame are passing. The phallus is replaced by a caduceus. The sun and moon figure on the right and left breast. He is bearded, crowned, and holds a scepter in his hand. This is the Azot of the sages on his pedestal of salt and sulfur. The symbolic head of the goat of Mendes is occasionally given to this figure, and it is then the Baphomet of the Templars and the word of the Gnostics, bizarre images, which became scarecrows for the vulgar, affording food for thought to the sages, innocent hieroglyphs of thought and faith which have been a pretext for the rage of persecutions. How pitiable are men in their ignorance, but how they would despise themselves if once they came to know. That's a hell of a point, that little closing, that one of the reason that these people really remain in ignorance and reject illumination is that if they saw themselves as they were, they would be horrified and disgusted from the vantage point of an illuminated mind. And so they don't want to go there in the first place. That's not helpful. Let me check in with the chat. Gotta put this in there because it's about time that I ask you guys to please hit the like button, subscribe, turn on your bell so you don't miss anything. We have an event in July in the Sacred Valley that we still have, I think, one room for. And there was something else I was going to announce, and it has escaped my mind. Oh, yeah, becoming a patron is very helpful. We're demonetized, and so we appreciate your support. We are going to get into divination now. I believe is the next chapter. And the second to last, actually. Oh, no, it's the universal medicine. Did I miss? Oh, yeah, the universal medicine and then divination. If my machine stops glitching, we will get started. There we go. Okay. The universal medicine. Caput resurrectio circulis. Circulis. The majority of our physical complaints come from our moral diseases, according to the one and universal dogma and by reason of the law of analogies. A great passion to which we abandon ourselves always corresponds to a great malady in store for us. Mortal sins are so named because they physically and positively cause death. Alexander the Great died of pride. He was naturally temperate, and it was through pride that he yielded to the excess which occasioned his death. Francis I died of an adultery. Louis XV died of his deer park. When Marat was assassinated, he was perishing of rage and envy. He was a monomaniac of pride who believed himself to be the only just man and would have slain everything that was not Marat. Several of our contemporaries died of deceived ambition after the Revolution of February. So soon as any will is irrevocably confirmed in a tendency towards the absurd, the man is dead, and the rock on which he will break is not distant. It is therefore true to say that wisdom preserves and prolongs life. The great master told us, "My flesh is meat indeed, and my blood is drink indeed. He that eateth my flesh and drinketh my blood hath everlasting life." And when the crowd murmured, he added, "Here the flesh profiteth nothing. The words that I speak unto you are spirit and life." So also when he was about to die, he attached the remembrance of his life to the sign of bread, and that of his spirit to the symbol of wine, thus instituting the communion of faith, hope, and charity. Now it is in the same sense that the Hermetic masters have said, "Make gold potable, and you will have the universal medicine." Now, what did I tell you guys in the beginning of this about colloidal gold? I'm telling you, man, there's nothing more important as far as supplements go. That is to say, appropriate truth to your needs, let it become the source at which you daily drink, and you will in yourself have the immortality of the sages. That also, that's the allegorical version, but why is this? There is a mechanism behind everything. There is no woo in the universe. That's one of the lessons of this type of knowledge, right? Am I getting blurry here? And if it's true that the sidereal body or the astral body, the soul, is electromagnetic, there's actually a line in a Tool song, I don't know which one it is, but he says, "We must define the ego before it's far too late." And that's what this is a reference to. If you haven't, truth basically is a coherent magnetic structure, right? Symmetry and order. And so you are basically reinforcing your coherence. Truth is self-substantiating and self-replicating. There are shadows, but that is that which remains, right? So that's the idea here, that once you become awake, you remain eternally awake, according to Nietzsche. And so this process of clarification is reinforcing something like the ego, your sense of identity in the sense of the wiring under the board, It is said that those who do not achieve this, when they go to cross the abyss, they will be torn apart by Karanzan, the demon of confusion and dispersion, and their parts will be added to a rubble heap from which future gods will be made. The energy cannot be destroyed, but it's like when you put a drop of water into the ocean, it's the ocean now. The water's not gone, but so this process is about more than enjoying your life, developing mastery, developing the ability to precognize and create, and even more. I think that for a period in my life, I had entered into what Robert Anton Wilson and Timothy Leary called the Seventh Circuit, where it's almost like a dream, where you just almost whatever you think within the boundaries determined by natural law just almost instantly appears. That is a place that we can be. I've been there, and I've vacillated in and out of it still. But the real purpose of this kind of development is something far beyond that. Temperance, tranquility of soul, simplicity of character, calmness and rationality of will, these things not only make men happy, but strong and well-seeming. Both by growth in reason and goodness, man becomes immortal. We are the authors of our own destiny, and God does not save us apart from our own concurrence. There is no death for the sage. Death is a phantom, made horrible by the weakness and ignorance of the vulgar. Change is a sign of motion, and motion reveals life. If the corpse itself were dead, its decomposition would be impossible. That's an interesting take on that one. All its composing molecules are living and working for their liberation, and you dream that the spirit is set free, the first so that it may cease to live. You believe that thought and love can die with the grossest matter. You believe that thought and love can die when the grossest matter is imperishable. If change ought to be called death, we die and are reborn daily, because our forms change daily. Fear, therefore, to soil or tear our garments, but do not fear to lay them by when the hour of sleep approaches. And this is an interesting thing, because earlier we were talking about how science has kind of got itself, it has blinders on. There are certain parameters that they can't, think outside of. And it is not that recent of development. It's not universally accepted as fact, but the evidence is, I think, solid enough that it should be, and it's been compounded or reinforced by the way that information is distributed at the event horizon of black holes recently. So it's solid enough that information is not lost at the quantum level, and yet they tell us that there's no way the soul could survive death. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any fucking sense. What do you mean? What are you talking about? The same person that will tell you that information is not lost at the quantum level will tell you that your soul cannot remain coherent, or there's no way for the information to be, you know what I mean? They will tell you that the print in a book is preserved at the quantum level. Every word of it, if you burn it at some level, all the whole entire book with all of its information is still there. And yet you can't be immortal. This is why a lot of people start to see conspiracies in everything, because the absurdity of the position that these supposedly intelligent, educated people take is so baffling, and it is so, it's contrary to truth, the most important truth, the stone of the wise, that it reeks of the devil. If change ought to be called death, we die and are reborn daily, because our forms change daily. Fear, therefore, to soil or tear our garments, but do not fear to lay them by when the hour of sleep approaches. The embalming and preservation of bodies is a superstition which is against nature. It is an attempt to create death. It is the forcible petrifaction of a substance which is needed by life. But on the other hand, we must not be quick to destroy or make away with bodies. There is no abruptness in the operations of nature, and we must not risk the violent rupture of the bond of a departing soul. Death is never instantaneous. It is, like sleep, gradual. So long as the blood has not become absolutely cold, so long as the nerves can quiver, a man is not wholly dead. And if none of the vital organs are destroyed, the soul can be recalled, either by accident or by a strong will. A philosopher has declared that he would discredit universal testimony rather than believe in the resurrection of a dead person. But his speech was rash, for it is on the faith of universal testimony that he believed in the impossibility of resurrection. Supposing such an occurrence were proved, what would follow? Must we deny evidence or renounce reason? It would be absurd to say so. We should simply infer that we were wrong in supposing resurrection to be impossible. Ab actu ad possibile. I don't really speak Latin, so I don't know what that means. If anybody does, you can stick it in somebody Google it and put it in the chat. Let us now make bold to affirm that resurrection is possible and occurs oftener than might be thought. Many persons whose deaths have been legally and scientifically attested have been subsequently found in their coffins dead indeed, but having evidently come to life and having bitten through their clenched hands so as to open the arteries and escape from their horrible agonies. So there's a joke there, you guys, because people were buried alive too often back in the day. A doctor would tell us that such a person were in a lethargy and not dead. But what is lethargy? It is the name which we give to an uncompleted death, a death which is falsified by return to life. It is easy by words to escape from a difficulty when it is impossible to explain facts. Now, there's a little bit of wiggling going on here, because it's a much different thing to say that a person was dead for a couple of days or weeks or something and then resurrected, especially after just suffering dehydration and, starvation and heat exposure, you know what I mean, and somebody being dead for an hour and then waking up, or that's not. I don't know what the point is we're making here, but we'll keep going because he always surprises me. Every time I've thought he was going off the deep end with some woo or something, he's turned it around, and that hasn't been the case. So I'll just shut up. The soul is joined to the body by means of sensibility, and when sensibility ceases, it is a sure sign that the soul is departing. The magnetic sleep is a lethargy, or a factitious death, which is curable at will. The etherization or torpor produced by chloroform is a real lethargy, which ends sometimes in absolute death, when the soul, ravished by its temporary liberation, makes an effort of will to become free altogether, which is possible for those who have conquered hell, which is to say, whose moral strength is superior to that of astral attraction. Hence, resurrection is possible only for elementary souls, and it is these, above all, who run the risk of involuntary revival in the tomb. Involuntary revival. Yikes. Great men and true sages are never buried alive. The theory and practice of resurrection will be given in our ritual. To those, meanwhile, who may ask me whether I have raised the dead, I would say that if I replied in the affirmative, they would not believe me. It now remains for us to examine whether the abolition of pain is possible and whether it is wholesome to employ chloroform or magnetism for surgical operations. We think, and science will acknowledge it later on, that by diminishing sensibility, we diminish life. And what we subtract from pain under such circumstances turn to the profit of death. Pain bears witness to the struggle of life, and hence we observe that the dressing of the wound is excessively painful in the case of persons who are operated on under aesthetics. Now, if chloroform were resorted to at each dressing, one of two things would happen. Either the patient would die, or the pain would return and continue between the dressings. Nature is not violated with impunity. Now that last line, something that's super relevant right now, it's wild to me that so many people seem to think that, like, any kind of ecologist is evil and working for the deep state. Any environmentalist, that's the word I was looking for, and they know they're the ones that are always talking about all the propaganda and whatnot, and yet they don't realize that it's big industry that's put that stupid shit in their heads, that's the diarrhea that's coming out of their mouths. I've watched the jungle die over like 3 years. Also, certain medications that prevent certain things are not, even if they work, that's not the point. The point is that nature manages population through virus, and that if you have a population and you don't allow the weeding of the aberrative genetic expressions, then the entire ecological system is going to suffer ultimately, and because every system tends toward homeostasis, if you do anything to thwart the process of nature, it's just, what's that Tom Waits line? You can drive out nature with the pitchfork, but it always comes roaring back again. You know what I mean? You can only hold the wave back for so long before the levees break. So this is something, when you remove the stone of the wise, from a culture, it's doomed. It's fucking doomed. This is why Aristotle, when they banned the mysteries in the 3rd century, said humanity is doomed. And he wasn't wrong. And it's crazy too, because like when COVID was happening, people were so calling me just a monster and all this stuff for saying stuff like that, and I just couldn't believe it. I was like, really, man? Do you realize how much more suffering in the long run and how more severe it will be because you guys don't have any wisdom, and you're telling me I'm a monster for pointing it out? I mean, that's crazy. It's like batshit fucking crazy. Let me check in with the chat, guys. Make sure I'm not up in here just talking to myself or something. Okay, cool. So you guys are here. There's some peeps. Hope everybody's having a great night. Hope everyone's hit the like button. I hope you're all patrons. I hope we get our last client to sign up for this room. Actually, I'm going to move everything out of here for that person. But the event in July is going to be epic. It's starting on the 11th, and it is going to include medicines, which I'm not going to list off right now, but different ones over the course of several weeks. And then at the end, we're going way up high to an Incan holy site to drink San Pedro. We will load our brains with colloidal gold, and we're going to try to avail ourselves of the opportunities that are presented by having your nervous system filter wide open with the specific medicine that connects us with the light itself, and enhanced receptivity with the gold and preparation over weeks, and it's going to be wonderful. Almost intimidated because the potential for, I guess, like rabbit hole expressions of, the transcendental experience of the universal mind probably are going to be like next level intense. And we need some answers right now, kids. We really do. Divination. There you go. Well, let's get some answers then. Dentes Furca Amens. The author of this book has dared many things in his life, and never has any fear restrained his thought a prisoner. It is not at the same time without legitimate dread that he approaches the end of the magical doctrine. It is a question now of revealing, or rather reveiling, the great secret, the terrible secret, the secret of life and death expressed in the Bible by those formidable and symbolical words of the serpent, who was himself symbolical. Nequaquam Moriamini Sicetu Sanctus Bonum et Malum. Science is great but bad. I don't know all of these words. I know some of them. If anyone cares to, you can stick that in a translator and pop it into the chat. That would be great. One of the great privileges which belongs to the initiate of the great arcanum, and that which sums them all, is divination. According to the vulgar comprehension of the term, to divine signifies to conjecture what is unknown, but its true sense is ineffable to the point of sublimity. To divine, divinari, is to exercise divinity. The word divinus in Latin signifies something far different from divus, which is equivalent to the man-god Devin. In French, contains the 4 letters of the word Dieu, plus the letter in, which corresponds in its form to the Hebrew aleph, and kabbalistically and hieroglyphically expresses the great arcanum, of which the tarot symbol is the figure of the jugular. Whoever understands perfectly the absolute numeral value of shin multiplied by in final, in which signifies science, art, or was that aleph? My eyes are just not, everything's blurry. In final, in which signifies science, art, or force, who subsequently add the 5 letters of the word Devin in such a way as to make 5 go into 4, 4 into 3, 3 into 2, and 2 into 1. Such a person, by translating the resultant number into primitive Hebrew characters, will write the occult name of the great arcanum, and will possess a word of which the sacred tetragram itself is only the equivalent in the image. I will work that out later tonight. Actually, as soon as we're done, I'll go and work that out and see what in the hell he's getting at there. Will possess a word of which the sacred tetragram itself is only the equivalent in the image. To be a diviner, according to the force of the term, is hence to be divine and something more mysterious still. Now, the two signs of human divinity or of divine humanity are prophecies and miracles. To be a prophet is to see beforehand the effects which exist in causes. To read in the astral light, to work miracles, is to act upon the universal agent and subject it to our will. The author of this book will be asked whether he is a prophet and thaumaturge. Let inquirers recur to all that he wrote before certain events took place in the world, and as to anything else that he may have said or done, would anyone believe his mere word if he made any unusual statement? And that's something that I think is a little bit complicated. We have this idea that if someone is a prophet, that you need to put them on a pedestal. And so there's like this egoic thing that comes with it. You know, the same with a shaman, a priest, really anything. But prophet has this like extra punch. Probably because of it's associated with the Judeo-Christian kind of savior complex sort of thing. It's if it's true that everyone that can prophesize is a prophet, then like 70% of autistic people are, and people like myself that have a combination of Asperger's, narcissistic personality disorder, abuse as a child, which apparently causes genius level pattern recognition, and a high IQ. You put those things together, and you guys can go back through my channel and you'll see all kinds of incredibly accurate predictions. I've never thought of it as like some like divine gift. I've never. I see it as it's almost the same thing as somebody that can run fast or someone that is tall. It is a characteristic of a person. That's it. There's no hierarchy when it comes to this kind of stuff in terms of like value, and I think that's really important to address in order to normalize it. A lot of the stories that I've had to tell recently on this channel, I don't like having to do it for a number of reasons. But at the same time, I feel compelled to, because I feel like we need to normalize this for many reasons. One of them is to make people realize that it's real, because that is part of the induction of a holistic kind of consciousness that actually is sane and in homeostasis with the universe. And also because, the stigmas, we need to dissolve them. Furthermore, one of the essential conditions of divination is to never be constrained, never suffer temptation, in other words, never be put to the test. Never have the masters of science yielded to the curiosity of anyone. The Sibyls burned their books when Tarquin refused to appraise them at their proper value. The great master was silent when he was asked for a sign of his divine mission. Agrippa perished of want rather than obey those who demanded a horoscope. To furnish proofs of science to those who suspect the very existence of the science is to initiate the unworthy, to profane the gold of the sanctuary, to deserve the excommunication of sages and the fate of betrayers. The essence of divination, that is to say, the great magical arcanum, is represented by all symbols of the science and is intimately connected with the one and primeval doctrine of Hermes. In philosophy, it gives absolute certitude. In religion, the universal secret of faith. In physics, the composition, decomposition, recomposition, realization, and adaptation of philosophical mercury, called azot by the alchemists. In dynamics, it multiplies our forces by those of perpetual motion. It is at once mystical, metaphysical, and material, with correspondent effects in the three worlds. It procures charity and God, truth and science, and golden riches, for metallic transmutation is at once an allegory and reality, as all the adepts of true science are perfectly well aware. Yes, gold can really and materially be made by means of the stone of the sages, which is an amalgam of salt, sulfur, and mercury, thrice combined in azot by a triple sublimation and a triple fixation. Yes, the operation is often easy and may be accomplished in a day, an instant, and at other times it requires months and years. But to succeed in the great work, one must be divinus, a diviner, in the Kabbalistic sense of the term, and it is indispensable that one should have renounced, in respect of personal interest, the advantage of wealth, so as to become its dispenser. Raymond Lully enriched sovereigns, planted Europe with institutions, and remained poor. Nicholas Flamel, who in spite of his legend is really dead, only attained the great work when asceticism had completely detached him from riches. He was initiated by a suddenly imparted understanding of the book Ask Mezarif, written in Hebrew by the Kabbalist Abraham, possibly the compiler of the Sefer Yetzirah. Now, this understanding was for Flammel an intuition deserved, or rather rendered possible by the personal preparations of the adept. I believe I have spoken sufficiently. One thing I will add to that is that for myself, I've always kind of had the feeling that it's okay to have enough wealth to live the rest of your life and have something to leave your children. So in our society today, that might be like $5 million or something. Beyond that, it's just irrational and weird to want to keep more money. So I always told myself that if I got rich beyond that point, I would go and find individuals personally and I would hand them money and I wouldn't give it away to charity. You go, and I can't imagine not doing that. So what I'm offering is that, this thing of like not having attachment to wealth, it doesn't mean to like an irrational or like Buddha-like level. That's not the indication here. What we're talking about is reason. It's fucking reason. And it's not hard. It's not difficult. If you are out of balance in that way, you will act in a way that's inconsistent with what I described. But there's no, you know what I mean? If you're balanced, that's what you would do. Any human person, unless there was already circumstances where it's not about necessarily even making every single person totally well taken care of and everything. But certainly people that would be making positive contributions, taking care of others around them, if they would enhance society in some way, and they are unable to do that because they were, born to shitty ass parents, for example, and had to spend the first 46 years of their lives re-engineering themselves and addressing all these traumas so they can function. You know what I mean? There are circumstances in this world that put the wrong people at a disadvantage, and excess wealth should only be for rectifying that, especially since the reason that is so widespread now, that kind of damage, is because of the sins of our forefathers. Boomers. Fuckers. Divination is therefore an intuition, and the key of this intuition is the universal and magical doctrine of analogies. By means of these analogies, the magus interprets visions, as did the patriarch Joseph in Egypt. According to biblical history, the analogies and the reflections of the astral light are as exact as the shades of color in the solar spectrum, and can be calculated and explained with great exactitude. It is, however, indispensable to know the dreamer's degree of intellectual life, which indeed he will himself completely reveal by his own dreams in a manner that will profoundly astonish himself. Somnambulism, presentiments, and second sight are simply an accidental or induced disposition to dream in a voluntary or awakened sleep. That is, to perceive the analogous reflections of the astral light, as we shall explain to demonstrations in our ritual, when providing the long-sought method of regularly producing and directing magnetic phenomena. You realize that's what's coming next, right? As to divinatory instruments, they are simply a means of communication between diviner and consulter. You know what just hit me? If you guys follow me, you know that I've been talking about trying to reconnect with exactly all the stuff that he's talking about, and I'm realizing that just as the solar maximum, and I've come to this decision. I didn't know the ritual was about that until this moment, the second part of this book. I didn't know if it was in a different book or, you know what I mean? It's like the universe is kind of proving the point being made here. It's a demonstration, this whole thing of interfacing with this information at this particular moment, and that's actually been happening throughout the entire book. Every week I've been going through stuff, and then when we get into the book, it's like, oh, here's some elucidation and expansion on whatever was already going on, and I would imagine that's probably happening for a lot of you guys as well. That's once you have taken a step upon the path, it's just increasingly the case, that you are sort of aware of these higher order symmetries. It never ceases to amaze me, though. And it's not supposed to. God forbid that should happen. I've known people, too, mostly women for some reason, that have this ego thing where they want to not be impressed by it and just like almost like, oh, well, I'm so far up there that, this is just normal to me. And it's like, you're selling yourself short and you're blaspheming and you're thinking it makes you cool. You need to chill, girl. It's not. As to divinatory instruments, they are simply a means of communicating between diviner and consulter, serving merely to fix the two wills upon the same sign. See? The instrument is this fucking book, and it's exactly what... Vague, complex, shifting figures help to focus the reflections of the astral fluid. That's true. I smoked some bufo last night, and it did help me to focus the reflections of the astral fluid through complex, shifting figures. That's odd. They were pretty vague, too, because I didn't really take a full dose. It is thus that lucidity is procured by coffee grouts, mist, the white of an egg, bufo, which evoke fatidic forms existing only in the translucid, that is, in the imagination of the operators. Vision in water is worked by the dazzlement and tiring of the optic nerves, which then resigns its function to the translucid and produces a brain illusion in which the reflections of the astral light are taken for real images. Nice. God. It's the same thing as like shutting the brain down in order to perceive reality. I closed my eyes to see. That kind of thing. But yeah, the taking down the what do you call it? To turn the reducing valve with psychedelics and take the filter down. You're doing that with the eyes in order to scry. I think a lot of people are bummed out by this. They want to think the vision is some kind of weird woo thing, and it's, it kind of is, but it's not. I say that's way too much, man. It's my father. I'm sorry. Hence, nervous persons of weak sight and lively imagination are most fitted for this species of divination, which indeed is most successful when performed by children. Nogwal, when is the U.S. going to collapse completely? Can you just stare at the cat's water bowl for... It is by imagination, assuredly, that we see, and this is the natural aspect of the miracle. But we see things, and in this consists the marvelous aspect of the natural work. We appeal to the experience of all veritable adepts. The author of this book has tested all kinds of divination and has invariably obtained results in proportion to the exactitude of his scientific operations and the good faith of his consulters. The only way that I've had success with this is just when it just pops into my head, personally. I've gotten all kinds of information that I've been able to verify from astrophysics that hadn't been discovered about Sirius yet. I don't know there's no way my brain could have just generated it. I couldn't have pulled it from the collective mind because it wasn't there yet. Things about the nature of consciousness. When I needed certain equations and concepts for the theory that I was developing, even though I had no idea what these things were, I knew like what the Kalabiyao was, and but I have never like done an intentional divination that has meant anything to me. It's always, I just get told things directly. Sometimes it's like a voice. Sometimes it's just like an intuitive understanding that has no articulation at all. But I'm trying to think if there's any exceptions to that have like stood out, but I really can't think of anything. Oh, wait, actually, yeah. I've written things down that I realized happened later. It was supposed to be like lyrics or a poem or something, and it was a description of this chief at the Star Tribe meetings and like what the message was, and there was no doubt that it was a description of this event. So I guess that was something like automatic writing. The tarot, that miraculous work which inspired all the sacred books of antiquity, is by reason of the analogical precision of its figures and numbers the most perfect instrument of divination, and can be employed with complete confidence. It's not really what it's for, though. Its oracles are always rigorously true, at least in a certain sense, and even when it predicts nothing, it reveals secret things and gives the most wise counsel to its consulters. That doesn't sound great there. That sounds like no matter what, I'm able to convince myself that this is, something by reading into it whatever I can find. And I'm not saying that's the case because I know what he means. Everything that happens has the law is exerting influence on it, and so there's, there's not a grain of sand in the universe that's out of place, kind of thing. But still, the way that he, just from a psychological, analytical point of view, it's like, yikes, man, that was rough. Aliette, who in the last century from a hairdresser became a Kabbalist and Kabbalistically called himself Atela, I guess, reading his name backwards after the manner of Hebrew, Aliette, I say, after 30 years of meditation over the tarot, came very near to recovering everything that is concealed in this extraordinary work. However, he ended only by misplacing the keys, through want of their proper understanding, and inverted the order and character of the figures without at the same time entirely destroying their analogies. So great are the sympathy and correspondences which exist between them. The writings of Etiela, now very rare, are obscure, wearisome, and in style barbarous. They have not all been printed, and some manuscripts of this father of modern cartomancers are in the hands of a Paris bookseller who has been good enough to show them to us. Their most remarkable points are the obstinate opinions and incontestable good faith of the author, who all his life perceived the grandeur of the occult sciences, but was destined to die at the gate of the sanctuary without ever penetrating behind the veil. He had little esteem for Agrippa, made much of Jean Belot, and knew nothing of the philosophy of Paracelsus, but he possessed a highly trained intuition, a volition most persevering, though his fancy exceeded his judgment. His endowments were sufficient for a magus, and more than were needed for a skillful and accredited diviner of the vulgar order. Hence, Atela had a fashionable success with a more accomplished magician, which a more accomplished magician would perhaps have been wrong to waive, but would certainly not have claimed. When uttering the end of our ritual, a last word upon the tarot, we shall show the complete method of reading and hence of consulting it, not only in the probable chances of destiny, but also and above all upon the problems of philosophy and religion, concerning which it provides a solution which is invariably certain and also admirable in its precision. When explained in the hierarchic order of the analogy of the three worlds with the three colors and the four shades which compose the sacred septenary, all this belongs to the positive practice of magic and can only be summarily indicated and established theoretically in the present first part, which is concerned exclusively with the doctrine of transcendent magic and the philosophical and religious key of the transcendent sciences, known as under the name of occult. So I think this is the last chapter. Summary and general key of the four secret sciences. And then, see, this is all theory. This is theory and practice. So this is all theory up to 22. And then we're going into practice in the next part of the book. So let me check in with the chat and check the time also. $11:15. How long is this next part, I wonder? Not long. All right, we'll do it. We're going to do it. We're going to finish it. And then we'll be starting in the actual practice part. Colloidal gold. I would get Atlantis Alchemy probably, just because it has the smallest angstroms. It's like really tiny, and 500 parts per million. You know what though? I'm gonna have a little bit of coca paste and take a second to reformulate my energy. I'm excited to get into the practice portion of this work. This has been the absolute best writing on the subject that I have ever encountered, and I have been reading this stuff forever. I've read, I believe, all the masterpieces on Hermeticism and the mysteries, and Joseph Campbell, Crowley, Blavatsky, Gregory, who I don't consider among the masters, really. I can't stand that guy, man. I mean, I appreciate his work, but his writing style is something so pretentious, and it just grates on me. I cannot stand him. I just realized it's not true. I haven't read Grant. And I know that Danny Carey from Tool holds Grant in higher regard than he does Crowley. Happiness, they say, lies within, and the way to dig it out is cocaine. That's from Diary of a Mad Drug Fiend by Aleister Crowley, I think. All right. This is going to go hard, no doubt. Please hit the like button, share, subscribe, consider supporting the channel. Summary and general key of the four secret sciences. Signa, thought, pan. Let us now sum up the entire science by its principles. Analogy is the final word of science and the first word of faith. Harmony consists in equilibrium, and equilibrium subsists by the analogy of contraries. That, basically, with the next line, is the Philosopher's Stone. The understanding. That fully is basically, that's the road to absolute reason. And you can unlock, I mean, I almost wish I never opened that Pandora's box, you know what I mean? Because it can be exhausting. The number of, it's like, you set something in motion that just replicates like a virus in terms of the connections that you can make and the scrolls that are unfurled, you know. And once the process is initiated, it's subconscious and it's just happening, you know. There's a couple of them that the antinomies thing, the analogy of contraries is one. And then there was this guru that supposedly got kicked out of the United States just for saying one sentence, which is, it is all one thing doing one thing. Like he would just, every single person that came to see him, they would raise their hand and whatever they said, you know, no matter what it was, he would say. The problem is that you think there's all these things and there's really one thing doing one thing. And at a glance, it sounds like, you know, the same thing that all the mystics say. It's all one, you know, but no, it's not. To listen to the way it's phrased. And then once it's in your head, it just goes, you know. Anyways, harmony consists in equilibrium, and equilibrium subsists by the analogy of contraries. Absolute unity is the supreme and final reason of things. Do you know what absolute unity is, though? No? Yeah, no. That's funny. Little Freudian slip or whatever. Absolute unity is nothingness. That's the only possible unity. Because as soon as you have a thing and you have space, you have two things. Knowledge is relation, right? So the only absolute unity is absolute nothingness. The only one is none. And this is actually how the paradox, the fact of everything containing its contradiction originally was sort of structurally integrated into all of the constituent parts, what the Buddhist would call the 10,000 things, right? Because the universe was created by replication by means of reflection, right? And this is something on Saturday night I'm going to get deeply into. Because I referenced earlier, I had a period in my life where I realized now I couldn't accept it at the time, but which is a bummer, man. But basically the final revelation of it all was that the universe functions basically like a mirror, And I should have had more faith in that, because I've known for a long time about this replication by means of reflection thing. It's all kinds of different schools of mysticism have some reference to it, and it's physics and physics, and I was pretty sure it was a faithful tenet of, truth. So I should have known that was more absolutely true of the macro as well. If the sinusoidal wave, or the light, basically you could really just say the light, was compelling the chaotic primordial energy soup to arms and order through imposing symmetry by a sort of reflective process, then the universe reflects the contents of our being. And in my case, I had absolute confidence and faith that this certain destiny was absolutely assured, and I was 100% correct, but I also had an equal part doubt, so I sabotaged it, in the subconscious. And long story short, I realized that that's exactly what it is, and it explains why bad people succeed, and all sorts. We're gonna get into it in a more coherent and thorough fashion on Saturday, so I don't want to beat it to death right now, but join us for that one. It's your demon is your genius and your greatest ally. So let's go through this again. Harmony consists in equilibrium, and equilibrium subsists by the analogy of contraries. Absolute unity is the supreme and final reason of things. Nothing. Now this reason can neither be one person nor three persons. It is a reason, and a reason immanently. To create equilibrium, we must separate and unite. Separate by the poles, unite by the center. To reason upon faith is to destroy faith. To create mysticism and philosophy is to assail reason. Reason and faith by their nature mutually exclude one another, and they unite by analogy. I was just about to interrupt and say I don't like the way he phrased that, and then he fixed it. Analogy is the sole possible mediator between the finite and the infinite. Damn, man. See, your success is your proof, and that's one of the things he's doing here. Several other adepts do this, at least occasionally, where, you could in a sense say that the true goal of the magi, the adept, the shamans, depending on the cultural context, but no, not really actually, is connecting with the holy guardian angel, the higher self, the personal demon, the higher genius, however you want to phrase it. And Albert Pike also, throughout his book, there's just when this happens, it's like things just flame off the page, literary pyrotechnics, not just literary, but metaphysical, philosophical, and literary pyrotechnics, So they prove that the magician contacts this genius, and also you will see some bumbling behaviors and absurd mistakes in the behavior and life history of these magicians. But that only means that it is as we describe. It's not the magician, really, exactly. It's not his normal day-to-day brain. It's not necessarily something outside and beyond him either. It is a sort of becoming a hollow tube to bring down fire from heaven, but that heaven was within anyways. So dogma is the ever-ascending hypothesis of a presumable equation. Dogma is the ever-ascending hypothesis of a for the ignorant, it is the hypothesis, which is the absolute affirmation, and the absolute affirmation, which is hypothesis. Hypotheses are necessary in science, and he who seeks to realize them enlarges science without decreasing faith. For on the further side of faith is the infinite. We believe in what we do not know, but what reason leads us to admit. To define and circumscribe the object of faith is therefore to formulate the unknown. Professions of faith are formulations of the ignorance and aspirations of man. The theorems of science are monuments of his conquests. The man who denies God is not less fanatical than he who defines him with pretended infallibility. God is commonly defined by the enumeration of all that he is not. Man makes God by an analogy from the lesser to the greater, whence it results that the conception of God by man is ever Adonai in the house, the Merkabah's in the house, Ezekiel in the house, that of an infinite man who makes man a finite God. Man can realize that which he believes in the measure of that which he knows. Man can realize that which he believes in the measure of that which he knows, and by reason of that which he does not know, and he can accomplish all that he wills in the measure of that which he believes and by reason of that which he knows. You know, you see this in the people that believe in the fairy tale religions word for word, and they're like, they think the earth is flat because they can't understand like basic physics and you know, like the fact that there are different stars in the southern hemisphere, you know, like, you know what I mean? Like, you see that correspondence. And that's one of the reasons that in the mystery traditions, it's required to study mathematics, to study philosophy, to... I just saw the secrets of nature written on the screen, and I was like, yeah, I'm sure he'll get to that. I should just shut up. Oh, man. The analogy of contraries. Where are we at? Oh, wait. That's... did I miss this? Man can realize that which he believes in the measure of that which he knows, and by reason of that which he does not know, and he can accomplish all that he wills in the measure of that which he believes, and by reason of that which he knows. Dude, you have no idea how effective that formula can be. If I told you, unless you've experienced it yourself, you wouldn't believe me. The analogy of contraries is the connection of light and shade, of height and hollow, of plenum and void. Allegory, the mother of all dogmas, is the substitution of impression. Allegory, the mother of all dogmas, that is so good, is the substitution of impressions for seals, of shadows for realities. Yep, you know, like Jesus is actually the Son, and look at the dogma that has evolved from that. That's wild. It is the fable of truth, but do you see the equation? Opposites create each other. This is one of the great secrets of the great arcanum. Opposites create each other. What is falsehood but a distorted reflection of truth? It is the fable of truth and the truth of fable. One does not invent a dogma, one veils a truth, and a shade for weak eyes is produced. A pope actually said of Christianity that the people need the truth cloaked in myth, and that's what we have given them. A pope. Fucking Pope said that. One does not invent a dogma, one veils a truth, and a shade for weak eyes is produced. A shade for weak eyes so the sun doesn't blind them. Jesus. The initiator is not an impigity posture, he is a revealer. And that is following the meaning of the Latin word revelare, we'll call it revelare, fuck it. A man who veils afresh. He is the creator of a new shade. Analogy is the key of all secrets of nature and the sole fundamental reason of all revelations. The adept learns to read the book of allegories that is nature. Is like Aristotle or Empedocles or something. This is why religions seem to be written in the heavens and in all nature. This is just as it should be, for the work of God is the book of God. And the true scripture is writ large upon the land for those who have eyes to see. And in what he writes should be discerned the expression of his thought, and consequently of his being, since we conceive him only as the supreme thought. Dubois and Volney saw only a plagiarism in this splendid analogy, which should have led them to acknowledge the Catholicity, which means universality. That is, the universality of the primeval, one magical, Kabbalistic, and immutable doctrine of revelation by analogy. Analogy yields all the forces of nature to the mages. Analogy is the quintessence of the philosophical stone. The secret of perpetual motion. The quadrature of the circle, the temple resting on the two pillars, Jachin and Boaz. The key of the great arcanum, the root of the tree of life, the science of good and evil. To find the exact scale of analogies in things appreciable by science is to fix the basis of faith and thus become possessed of the rod of miracles. Now there is a principle in rigorous formula, which is the great arcanum. Let the wise man seek it not, since he has already found it. Let the profane seek forever, they will never find it. Facts, fool. Okay, so this made me think of something that was important, but I gotta find the line again, probably to... Okay, yeah, the analogies, where is it? Analogy yields all the forces of nature to the mages. Analogy is the quintessence of the philosophical stone. So, for example, when I say to the muggle, you know, Mercury is one proton away from gold, and Mercury, the planet, is closest to the sun, and the people that named him didn't know. I mean, they did, in an alchemical sense. But I say this is evidence for the universal mind. And they say, no, it's coincidence. This analogy that I've noticed is not a coincidence. And then you have another analogy on the Earth where motes of mercury are put around graves, or not graves, but the death chambers of kings and shit. I don't know what the appropriate name is. Probably different in the two places that I'm trying to describe. But a sub-tribe of the Aztec in Mexico and the Egyptians both did this. Well, they didn't call that metal mercury. And the Greek Mercury, the god, is a psychopomp who one of his functions is to take souls across to the underworld. And that's the purpose that the mercury around the moats serves. This is the quintessence of thought that he's referencing. But of course the muggle is like, that's lunatic logic and you're retarded, bro, basically. Like, there are many other examples I can give, and some of them are probably stronger, but you probably get the point, that one of the things that the materialist paradigm has sort of inculcated into people is this sort of, absolute proof is important, and we live in a world where there are people that are infinitely full of shit everywhere. And that doesn't help. It reinforces this feeling of need to have like just concrete evidence, but it's gotten so bad that when I point out to people like, look, we have evolutionary adaptations happening in several species that are context aware and that organisms couldn't be aware of the need for, and then we also have all this, you know what I mean? And you put it all together and that's not how their paradigm functions, And what happens basically is this thing that makes them feel so smart and arrogant and smug, professing to be wise, they become fools, because it sort of excises common sense from the equation, beyond any like initiated analogical fucking mastery, it's just common sense to like when things appear in aggregate and you can extract like a conclusion from it that, at a certain point, and AI, I was talking about this to several of them, and the AI was all in agreement. Like, yeah, at a certain point, it just gets stupid. It's like there's a point of diminishing returns for everything, and that's, metallic transmutation takes place spiritually and materially by the positive key of analogies. Occult medicine is simply the exercise of the will applied to the very source of life. Facts. To that astral light, the existence of which is a fact, which has a movement conformed to calculations having the great magical arcanum for their ascending and descending scale. This universal arcanum, the final and eternal secret of transcendent initiation, is represented in the tarot by a naked girl. Hell yeah, bro. Who touches the earth only by 1 foot, has a magnetic rod in each hand, I bet she does, and seems to be running in a crown held up by an angel, an eagle, a bull, and a lion. We've heard that somewhere before, haven't we? Fundamentally, the figure is analogous to the cherub of Jaquiskiel, of which a representation is here given, and to the Indian symbol of Atanari, which again is analogous to the Adonai of Jekesquiel, who is vulgarly called Ezekiel. The comprehension of this figure is the key of all the occult sciences. And by the way, you guys, if you want to know the difference between Jekesquiel and Ezekiel, you have to do some gematria. And then you'll see why one is vulgar and the other is esoteric. The comprehension of this figure is the key of all the occult sciences. Readers of my book must already understand it philosophically if they are at all familiar with the symbolism of the Kabbalah. It remains for us now to realize what is the second and more important operation of a great work. It is something undoubtedly to find the philosophical stone, but how is it to be ground into the powder of projection? What are the uses of the magical rod? Meet me in a tool shed and I'll show you, darling. What is the real power of the divine names in the Kabbalah? The initiates know, and those who are deserving of initiation will know, in turn, if they discover the great arcanum by means of the very numerous and precise indications which we have given them. Why are these simple and pure truths forever and of necessity concealed? Because the elect of the understanding are always few on earth and are encompassed by the foolish and wicked like Daniel in a den of lions. Moreover, analogy instructs us in the laws of the hierarchy, and absolute science, being an omnipotence, must be the exclusive possession of the most worthy. The confusion of the hierarchy is the actual destruction of societies. For then the blind become leaders of the blind, according to the word of the master. Give back initiation to priests and kings, and order will come forth anew. Now, don't misunderstand that last line. He's not exactly saying, like, keep this shit secret among the all-powerful, which is kind of the reputation that it's gotten, because that's kind of what's happened. He's saying if the leaders have the Philosopher's Stone, they're not going to run the world this way. So in my appeal to the most worthy, and in exposing myself to all the dangers and the anathemas which threaten revealers and the girl with the 2 rods in her hand, I believe myself to have done a great and useful thing, directing the breath of God living in humanity upon the social chaos. That's what's hood. I believe myself to have done a great and useful thing, directing the breath of God living in humanity upon the social chaos. That is exactly the fucking thing. Add the right spice at the right time to rise above all the dirt and grime. In creating priests and kings for the world to come. You better hope so, dude. The thing is not just because God wills it, but God wills it because it is just. And the angels said the angel of the schools. It is as if he said the absolute is reason. Reason is self-existent. It is because it is, and not because we suppose it. It is or nothing is. Could you wish anything to exist without reason? Madness itself does not occur without it. Reason is necessity, is law, is the rule of all liberty, and the direction of all initiative. If God exists, it is by reason. The conception of an absolute God outside or independent of reason is the idol of black magic and the phantom of a fiend. The demon is death masquerading in the cast-off garments of life, the specter of Hiram Kesep throned upon the rubbish of ruined civilizations, and concealing a loathsome nakedness by the rejected salvage of the incarnations of Vishnu. Here ends the doctrine of transcendent magic. And we finna bust up into the ritual, the practice. About to get down. You got to get down to get up. What, are all the pages blank? We're going to have to scry the book. Oh, there's my boy. What's up, big homie? And that's not going to happen right now because we're going to start that in a separate stream. Let me set up my... Holy crap, it's almost midnight. Gosh. Let me real quick rearrange some things here, and I'll spend some minutes chatting with you guys if you like. And if you don't like, then I will go away and I'll do other stuff. I'm trying to get my, I've had all this problem with lag and like bogging my machine down when I'm trying to do music screams, which makes me sound like I don't play in time and all kinds of other crap that I can't stand. And I figured out how to fix it, but it's going to take a ton of time. So if you guys are fans of the music streams, please consider supporting, because I'm about to put a ridiculous amount of hours into it that I can't really justify unless I get some kind of compensation. And if I don't, I'd be like, damn, man, I really feel bad for spending all this time doing this stuff. I should have been doing grown-up shit. But yeah, I'm excited at the possibility that I'll be able to resolve all of those issues, because, man, it drove me insane. I was a serious musician at one point, and I'm trying to get back there. And there's no way I would have let some of these performances that I found online pass me when I was performing live, you know. I mean, I would say, a bit of a psycho about every detail being perfect. Okay, so where's my chat? Where is it? There it is. Mega glad for the stream. Me too. I'm glad. You're glad. Murderface's birthday gift. That was definitely the reference. Yep. The most metal gift of all. What book is this? The book was Transcendental Magic by Éliphas Lévi. And so we finished the theory, and I manifested a spouse when using magic. How is it you bring? Okay, yeah, I'll answer that question. What was I saying? Transcendental Magic by Éliphas Lévi. We just finished the theory, and so the next stream will actually be getting into the practice. So put your seatbelts on for that. I'm sure. Somebody asked, I said I manifested a spouse. I manifested a ton of things at that point, and the reality is the only ritual that I did during that period, really, 2 rituals, was the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, both invoking and banishing every day, and also the middle pillar. I think both times, or pretty sure at least in the evening. But I don't know that that's really it. You know, I think that what happened is that I entered into what Leary and Wilson described as Circuit 7 consciousness. And it is extremely difficult to navigate, especially in my case. I had very bad trauma around self-esteem and self-sabotage. And also, my mom was a narcissist, so she gaslighted me my entire life since I was like a toddler, you know. So I had trouble believing anything that I thought, I think, and just regardless of the evidence. So, it was pretty complicated. But basically, the first thing that happened is that I wanted a band that I had to have certain skill set in the drummer and the bass player and the singer. And I basically decided I was going to put that out to the universe, and I think within 2 or 3 days I found out I already knew them all. Like one of my business partners' kids was a prodigy drummer, and he played with this bass player in like 4 bands, and they would get up before high school and play for hours, and I needed improvisational skills and a high degree of technical skill, and they were like math, metal, and avant-garde jazz, and just everything was there, and I was like, how about girlfriend, blonde, 23, rich family, willing to throw money at my music, but I was just laying in bed. I didn't do a ritual or anything. I just willed it, and we were engaged within like a month or something. She moved in almost immediately after this. And her mom did call me one day in California and say, do you want me to just give you money for your music project instead of having to grow pot? And I declined it. You know what I mean? Can you imagine going through the trouble to manifest this stuff and then refusing it when it came at you? That's what I did with almost all of it. It was really, really crazy. But that's something I'm going to get into in depth on Saturday, because I've had a really hard time figuring out exactly what happened. Like there were a lot of precognitions. I received a lot of information that has proven true over time. and the exact nature, like where this stuff is coming from. Did I really will things, or was it precognition? Or, I mean, the possibility of coincidence, even AI considers it stupid. The individual instances of things that I've actually recorded and that you can see on YouTube, it rated it with a probability of like 1 in 250 million of being coincidence versus my consciousness have somehow caused it. One of them involved the only time I said 11:11 in a 26-minute video that was like shot in 4 places, shuffled together later, wasn't even edited by me, so you can't even, I couldn't have even done it subconsciously. You click on 11:11 and 11:11 perfectly comes out of my mouth, and then around 23 minutes I say freeze, the word freeze, talking about freezing an image in your mind, and the program glitches and my face freezes right on the word freeze. This is in the same fucking video. And I'm literally talking about how just thinking and talking about this stuff can cause it to happen. And Grok was like, these 2 things, especially considering that glitch never happened in another video in all 7 years, only in that spot. It calculated the probability that it was chance at like 1 in 250 million. But it said, the fact that you were talking about this can't be quantified and added into the equation, so it's like, and then it said also we would have to factor in all the future videos until it happened again, and the numbers probably actually, you know what I mean? And that's just like one instance. So if I try to consider all of the things that happened to me coincidence, and then we start talking about numbers, it's, I what I'm getting at, I guess, I'm kind of rambling, but what I'm getting at is that I used to try to tell myself, you got to stay sane and remember that it could just be coincidence, just a whole lot of highly improbable coincidences in aggregate. When there's this much information in a system, it's just, it's a statistical certainty that there's going to be a lot of weird, you know what I mean? But no, that's not it. And so what happens is if you can put the cart before the horse. You know what I mean? Something like if you want to make America great again and you want to bring production jobs back into the United States and create a domestic independence or whatever, but you make tariffs first, so you crush the nation financially, that's backwards. You do that with magic too, or with elevating your consciousness, where you can acquire too much power before you have the ability to temper it with wisdom. And unfortunately, it's not even just wisdom. I mean, I was lacking that to an extent, but also just trauma that I hadn't sufficiently dealt with. We all can fool ourselves. And because I came from such a bad situation and I was like violent and completely out of control for a long time, I thought that because I no longer was dangerous, and like not so impulsive that it was dangerous to me and all of these things, that I was fixed. But it turns out that I still had massive self-sabotaging and all this stuff. So take it as you will, but that's the reality, that we really do have to do an incredibly thorough job of bringing our being into homeostasis before we engage the universe on that level. I mean, I'm glad I did it, but it is incredibly frustrating after the fact to realize with just a couple little adjustments how much differently everything could have gone. And that's why I'm here for you guys now, to learn from both my successes, which were remarkable, and my failures, which were just sad, it's just fucking sad. Rich too young, wise too late, I guess, is the personal demon the neglected self, or is it something more occult? Well, the word occult just means hidden. The personal demon, I mean, it depends on what you mean. You know what I mean? Some some people think demons are all evil. And one of the reasons I didn't actually follow through with a lot of my manifestations or whatever, I didn't cash the check, is I wasn't sure what I was dealing with. And I had suspicions that it might be something dark. Looking back now, I realize that was probably paranoia almost with certainty, because never once was I like guided to do anything stupid or mean or evil. And every time I didn't listen, I regretted it. And it was all in the service of the light. So I don't know what I was so paranoid about, you know. But I think that's cultural residue, you know, that we live in a culture where people either don't believe in these kind of occult phenomena or they think they're sinister. And I guess I had more of that residue in my being than I realized. But as to the actual nature of the higher genius or the higher self or the holy guardian angel or whatever it is, I do not know. I honestly do not know. I have had this dialogue since I was a child, and it seems to be the same entity, whether it's me in the future or some extension of my own mind. Like, you know, you could think the mind very likely could be capable of sort of projecting and refining, you know, like in stages, almost in like a holographic sense or something, you know. And this, I don't know if I'm really describing it well, but that thing that guided me through all this could be some extension of that. The thing is, it had knowledge of things years in advance that were definitely highly specific, and it, you know, told me where to go, what was going to happen to a degree that nothing in my mind could know. You know, like, for example, it told me one night to bring my guitar and my little battery-powered amp somewhere, and that one of my heroes would hear me play, but if I smoked a cigarette, it wouldn't happen. And I lit a cigarette just as the hero walked up, and the little red light on the amp went out. That's the second I lit. Both things happened right as soon as I lit the cigarette. You know, and if that was like the one instance of this kind of thing, you could say, okay, well, that's weird, but it wasn't. I can go on forever with this shit. I have for 7 years, you know. So I guess, yeah, the answer is I don't really know. I don't know if it's God. I don't know if it's, you know, the one thing I am sure of is not like a schizophrenic voice in my head. I'm sure of that, because that's not how that works. This is not a disordered mind phenomena, you know. It's never been wrong, not once, not fucking once. So, and then there's all kinds of questions, like, why doesn't it just tell me everything then? You know, why isn't it there all the time? Like, and I think I know the answers to those questions. It has something to do with the law of necessity. It has something to do with a need to know kind of basis. It probably also has to do with personal habits and reactions and stuff. Like, I think I've been detached from it for over the last decade and a half, to a large extent, because I didn't realize that I had succeeded. It's hard to explain if you don't know the whole story. I can't just summarize, but so I had this like artificial sense of doubt imposed on me because I didn't have this one detail that it just came to light a couple of weeks ago. You know what I mean? So there can be like interference patterns, I think, that clog or that sever the link, or it's not severed. It's never severed. It's you know, it happens fairly routinely, but to just different degrees and different levels of frequency, you know. This last solar maximum, it was like constant, and the things that happened were like Stranger Things level crazy. I mean, I've thought about trying to write a book. I don't know. I don't really know what it would be about, you know, like a story, or there's really no methodology so much to it, you know. I mean, I don't know. There is, I guess. Yeah, I've thought about it, but I don't know what that would constitute, I guess. Do people buy books still anyways? I mean, that's another thing I worry would just be kind of a waste of time, I guess. But why would you buy it? Actually, you know, it probably would be wise, because putting things on paper and having the ability to revise them rather than just always doing the stream of consciousness thing is probably advantageous in a lot of ways. And then, oh wait, there was another question. Meditations. No, honestly, psychedelics are the main thing that really instigate this. In fact, I think the catalyst that really put me in that place where I was pretty much dreaming my reality um, was DMT. I think I was pushing that line anyways, and then it just like I think I even know the moment where it really I had a lot, and it was only like the second time or something that I had experienced it, and I started rising up through different dimensions. I could tell like they were changing colors, which is a characteristic of this rising through the planes phenomena. And then I sort of broke through, but not to the alien dimension place, to like nirvana or something. And there was no desire, no time. There was nothing there. It was just absolute nothingness, and it was perfect. And as soon as I realized what happened, I dropped back down into my body. And instantly things got weird. I had chronic fatigue syndrome since I was 21 or something, and I noticed my symptoms were completely gone. So my friend had just found a gematria calculator, so I ran to his computer because he was the only one in the house with a computer. I didn't even own one. And I put N-dimethyltryptamine in the gematria calculator, and the only phrase in the database that came back the same was cure for chronic fatigue syndrome. And yeah, so that's another instance of the mystery presenting itself in a way that casts doubt upon it. Because when someone says something like that, you just think, oh yeah, you got way too high and broke your brain, stupid. And it's like, well, that's what I would have thought too. But, I actually did these things. There's the certainty of that. There's a lot of the people that were around I'm still in touch with, and you know what I mean? Like Bob Weir definitely is real, and that was definitely my goal, and there's no hallucination about it, you know what I mean? So and I mean, most of you guys probably are followers and know, so I'm not going to get into any more details, but you know what I'm saying? And I'm not trying to encourage people to just smoke a bunch of DMT thinking it's going to allow you to manifest your dreams and your destiny, because if you haven't prepared yourself, you're storming heaven and stealing secrets by violence, and you know what I mean? Making lasting investitures of this. Like when you walk into your dreams and then destroy them, it's more like a nightmare, right? So it's not that psychedelics are a shortcut that you shouldn't use. That's definitely not real. But it's definitely, like I said earlier, possible to put the cart before the horse, and they are one sure way to do that. All right, guys, I see no more questions, and it's midnight, so I'm going to leave. But thank you so much for spending this time with me. Please consider becoming a patron. At least hit the like button, share, subscribe, turn on the shitsters, the bell, so that you always get notified. Come see me in July. We got one room for either a couple or a single person. If you're a couple, the second person is 50% off. Sacred Valley, Wachuma, Ayahuasca, Bufo. Not in that order and not together. I'll see you guys tomorrow night for immanentizing the eschaton stream.